Today we'll talk about a remarkable piece of modern poetry, that is, a poem entitled The Second Coming, which is written by W.B. Yeats. Students, before talking about the poem The Second Coming, let's have an introduction with the poet himself. Students, full name of W.B. Yeats is William Butler Yeats. Students, in the history of English poetry or English literature, he is recorded as a famous poet and a dramatist of the 20th century. And if we have a close look at the growth or evolution of Victorian poetry, we find that W.B. Yeats stands at the turning point of Victorian period and modernism. There is a gradual growth, there is a gradual evolution in his poetry towards the modernism. So he's rightly called the modernist poet, and his present poem, The Second Coming, which is prescribed for your syllabus, also just bears witness to the modernistic trends in his poetry. And next, he is also called a pillar of Irish literary movement. This versatile genius W.B. Yeats was born in 1865 at Dublin in Ireland. He died in 1939 in France. His father, John Butler Yeats, was a portrait painter, and this we can say that the love for art and aesthetics he just inherited from his father, and his mother was Susan Mary Pollexfen. And this poet W.B. Yeats was educated at Godolphin School, London, Erasmus High School and Metropolitan High School, Dublin. The point is that he got his education from England and Ireland, both the places, and later on he involved in Irish literary theatre that was founded in 1899, and he himself contributed a lot to theatre, and he co-founded the Abbey Theatre in 1904. That is also known as the Irish Nationalist Theatre. In 1917 he married Georgie Hyde-Less, and this great literary artist received an honorary degree from Trinity College in 1922. The one more interesting fact about this poet is that he was not a literary artist only. He just has some political bent of interest also, and he elected to Irish Senate in 1922. And this great literary figure of 20th century received Nobel Prize for Literature in 1923. Students, let's talk about the formative influences on the literary career of this great literary figure of 20th century. And as in the previous slide, you have seen that there is a gradual growth or evolution in his literary career from the master of traditional verse to a modernist poet. So in the initial phase, in his poems, his love for Irish folklore is reflected over there. So the first and foremost influence on his literary career was that of his mother, and his mother was the first to share with him the Irish folk tales. Then all his readings, the poets, the writers whom he read and loved, they also influenced his style, his writing style, the way he has handled or portrayed the society around. These literary figures whom he read and loved and followed, they were Dante, Shakespeare, Donne, William Blake and P.B. Shelley. And another important influence on his writings is that of John O'Leary. He was a famous Irish nationalist. Then next one is Maud Gonne. She was also an Irish nationalist, and W.B. Yeats has just fell in love with this lady, and in so many poems he has just referred to Maud Gonne in his writings. Then the next is that of Lady Gregory. She was an Irish dramatist, she was a folklorist, and with Lady Gregory he just co-founded that Abbey Theatre, which we have discussed in the previous slide. Students, if we talk about the distinctive features or the specific traits of his poetry, we find that nationalism is there, and he is also called the pillar of Irish nationalist literature. And then there is love for Irish folklore, legends, history and myths is also reflected there. And thirdly, W.B. Yeats is known for his complex symbolism. As a symbolist, he just placed at an important place in the history of English literature. And lastly, we find that there is a lot of experimentation in terms of versification in his poetry. Students, this great poet wrote several poems, plays and prose pieces, and he just got published more than 30 anthologies of poetry. To name a few are The Wanderings of Oisin and Other Poems, written in 1889. Then there is Responsibilities and Other Poems, published in 1916, and The Tar, that was published in 1928. And as far as his prose works are concerned, the very important work, that is A Vision, an explanation of life. In this very prose writing, W.B. Yeats has given an expression to his philosophy of life. And here in this very prose piece, A Vision, he has discussed his concept of history, and he believed that the history grows or evolves in its cyclical processes. He talks about that when one cycle is over, then the next cycle takes place. And this same concept of history, which is explained in A Vision, is also referred to in the poem The Second Coming. So when we will just analyze the poem, we will refer to this concept of history, which is given in this prose writing. Students, the poem The Second Coming, which is prescribed in your syllabus, was written in 1919, and this poem was first published in American magazine The Dial in 1920, and later on this poem got published in his another collections of poems. And if we talk about the theme of the poem, so this poem just gives an expression to the despair about modernism. This poem talks about the unrest of post-war period. Students, the post-war period is identified as a period of disillusionment, meaninglessness, hopelessness, despair, disorder and chaos. And how in that period of chaos and disorder, how when that cycle of chaos and disorder is going, needs to move away and needs to replace another cycle of history, that's how the need of the gods return is just reflected in this very poem. And we can say that this poem is based on the theme of order versus chaos. And one more important thing which is to keep in mind while analyzing or reading this poem, that this poem is based on three religious and spiritual concepts which has a great influence on the formation of W.B. Yeats' mind and thoughts. The first one is the philosophy of a vision. As I have told you in the previous slide, that his prose writing, A Vision, is just gives an expression to his philosophy of life. And in this book he has elaborated upon his concept of history, that how history evolves in a cyclical process. When one cycle is over, another cycle takes place, and how the cycle which is just connected to chaos, it is to end, and the cycle which is connected with order takes place. So This is all reflected in this poem also. Then the next one is the image of the Sphinx. Sphinx, the Greek myth of Sphinx, that is also referred in this poem. As in previous slides, you have got an idea that W.B. Yeats is known for his love for myth and folklore in English poetry. And the Sphinx of Greek myth, students, actually it is portrayed as a monster with the human head and a lion's body and with the wings of an eagle. So this very monster is also, this very reference to the Greek mythology is also there in this poem. Then thirdly, the very important one is the second coming of Christ. Here there is a reference to Bible. We can say that he is talking about a second coming while having the idea or the concept of the second coming of Christ as described in Bible. So this is the background information about the second coming, that how, when it is published, and what are the themes which are handled in this poem. In our next video, we will have a line by line analysis of this poem. Thank you.